Hello and welcome in. I am so sorry for all the delays, the interruptions, the technical difficulties. I mean, dude, listen, I'm going to tell you like this. I'm going to start you off like this. This episode is going to be very casual. I had a terrible day at my first new job, or my first day at a brand new job. I can't even speak. And then we just had a plethora of technical difficulties on top of everything happening. So coming in here, I was going to be late, and then in an attempt to actually, you know, make this functional, I had a driver that wasn't up to date. I had a few other issues going on, and so here we are. This is just it. But you probably saw the title, Cuckservative Central, which is my new term for the Daily Wire, because if you use Con Inc., everybody who's in Con Inc. says, well, man, this guy must love Steven Crowder because he coined a term, 2 years ago that no one ever really uses besides just kind of, thrusting all of the conservative large corporations into one group, namely the Daily Wire and the Fox News media. So with that being said, you're probably curious why I have that brought up, but if you've been on X or Twitter, you probably have a good, decent idea of where we're probably going to go with this. And so with that being said, let me go ahead and just swing it over to Donnie. Who are you, sir? What do you do?
I am Donnie Brook. I am a punk rocker at heart, political junkie, radical conservative, somewhere between libertarian and conservative politically, anti-authoritarian mostly.
Yes, we do like anti-authoritarianism. Although I do find myself being closer to that wing than Donnie is. And let's just honestly do this how we did it conversationally, Donnie. We had an order, a hierarchy, I should say, when we were, or I guess when I was putting the outline forward. But again, we're pitching ideas back and forth, me and Donnie and I, looking forward to like what to cover leading up to today. And so we had an idea, we had it set, and we were going to go with like the bloodbath, the bloodbath hoax with Donald Trump to lead into it. But Donnie actually wanted to do the Cuckservative Central, well, in my words, not his. He wanted to focus on the Michael Knowles and the Pearly Things debate, which I think is just a very, very shallow look, very lack of depth into the entire subject of itself. But I want to honestly give Donnie the floor here. I want to have you go ahead and lead into it, brother. What wanted you to make you cover this more so than anything else we wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so I saw your tweet that blew up, talking to Jeff Younger about it, and he had a nice little clip of the whole thing, and I actually talked to him a little bit earlier on Twitter. He was one of the accounts you told me I should follow when I first started for the show.
Yes, sir.
Um, and I think my big concern around this is have you ever heard of horseshoe theory?
Yes, I have heard of horseshoe theory. Why don't you go ahead and give like a brief
Okay, so just
explanation
to
real quick?
explain it,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, just to explain it to the audience, the idea is that we've all heard there's left, right, center politically, but some people think of it as this line, but I don't think of it like that. I think of it as a horseshoe, right? So the further you get away from each other, more radicalized, the more similar the policies become, right? Like, um, an authoritarian fascist government, an authoritarian communist government. There's not really that much difference between those things. And what I'm seeing right now a lot from people on the right that were my go-to when the left started becoming authoritarian. You see Tim Pool pushing for the Twitter ban that gives the government power to take over social media apps, but not the apps that played ball and lobbied for it, like Facebook. Those ones are exempt from the bill. And then I saw this clip of Pearl saying, every new father, new family should do mandatory DNA tests to prove fatherhood, which I think is crazy because when you say mandatory, what you mean is government law, and what that implies is force or punishment for noncompliance. And I think I've seen a lot of both sides yelling the same thing. Let's give government more power to interfere in our lives. And I very much want to start stripping power. And nothing against the people that are saying these things, except Tim Pool, because I'm very much not fond of him. But Jeff Younger specifically, was a good follow that you gave me. He says a lot of good stuff. So even people that I consider intelligent people are screaming, like let's give the government to fix this problem. I want to say stripping let's start stripping powers from the government and figuring out these problems on our own at a local community level. I know I said a lot. I'm sorry.
No,
I had
you're
a lot
good.
of thoughts.
You're totally good. I love it. I'm on screen. You'll see the tweet that he saw. He was talking about the blew up. There's a reply I had onto one of these debates here, and you can see it. We won't even need to play the clip here. It does a pretty good job with this caption. Because what it says here is, Pearly Things tells Michael Knowles there should be mandatory DNA testing at birth. So the specific issue we're talking about giving the government power for would be the mandatory DNA testing. That is the issue at hand here. And so Michael says no. And so Michael doesn't do much substantiation in terms of how Donnie had said why he doesn't want the mandatory DNA testing. Michael Knowles substantiated his argument by saying because it would make his wife feel bad. Now, I'm going to be 100% more keen to listening to the argument Donnie put forward before I'm going to listen to the argument of just because your wife feels bad. Like, I'm sorry, the entire purpose of people wanting to institute the mandatory DNA testing is specifically because they want extra protections against said woman. So it doesn't, I guess to me, it's very, what's the word? Nonsensical to then abide by that argument when in fact the argument being in opposition being the former argument is that, no, I want the protections. And the person argues back, no, your protections would make the person you want to be protected against feel bad. Ultimately, though, the protection wouldn't be against the woman. The protection would be against being court ordered to, for an 18-year sentence of child support. On top of that, if you're not paying the child support, you are under threat of law, of going to prison, going to jail. And so I also just said a lot here too. Let me bring it back to what Donnie's argument was. You had specifically said giving the government more power by instituting the mandatory DNA testing, and you are against giving the government more power. And here's where I don't think that argument adds up, and here's why. During the process of childbirth, you and I both know that they take a bunch of different blood samples, a bunch of different things to do this kind of testing, this kind of testing, this kind of testing, make sure her oxygen levels are okay, make sure the iron levels are sufficient, all these things that go into it. I don't really see it as much of a leap to then also, and then throw in the vaccine schedule on there as well too, to then add on that already lengthy list an extra step, which is to do just a DNA test right then and there. And then what I see being posed against it, which I can agree with your argument here, Donnie, which is if I was to agree with your argument, I want to take it all the way to the point of no person can be mandatorily given a vaccine at all. Remove that entirely. And I would be okay with that. And then allow someone to have the schedule, the list, and they can go through and they can see, well, okay, well, maybe I'll take this one. Or maybe I'll take this one. And that's kind of where I situate my argument, which is I'm okay with that, but then pull back and we can leave the mandatory DNA test to die, but then also remove all of the other instances where the government's forcing you to do these things. Because if you were to ask me between a mandatory vaccine schedule and a mandatory DNA test to protect the rights of a father, like I'm 100% more keen to accept the mandatory DNA test than I would accept the mandatory vaccine schedule. But I'll let you respond to that.
Of course. So I don't remember them taking any of my blood when my wife was pregnant. I don't mean to keep bringing up Jeff younger because he doesn't know me. He doesn't probably agree with a lot of things I say. But what we had talked about was he said, well, what would be okay? And I said, look, if you made that part of the child support process in the court, or if you made it part of custody, like if you made it a mandatory part of the court process that already exists, that's fine. But saying every new family should hand over their DNA to the federal government for them to do tests, because those samples that you're talking about that they do tests in the hospital, those are doctors. Those stay in the hospital. They're under confidentiality. It's not a guy in a suit saying hand over your DNA. And I don't trust the government. I love my country. I love my countrymen. I don't trust the government at all. And I don't even trust them with my spit. If they want to get my DNA, they'll have to send a Fed around and wait for me to spit on the ground, and then he'll have to go pick it up like a chump. I'm not going to send it to them in a nice clean vial. I'm not going to send 23andMe my DNA. And I don't think you should either. Otherwise, in a couple of years, there's going to be some clones of you guys walking around somewhere. And I don't like the word mandatory because people like to use mandatory, but you're telling the government that they can use violence against you if you don't comply. That's what mandatory means in the context, in the political context that it's being used in. And I'm against that with vaccines, and I'm against it with government DNA tests, with the federal government, not tests done by a doctor at a hospital.
Well, listen, I can agree with you 100% on the solution that you proposed in the very initial portion of your response back to me, which was if you make it mandatory in the court proceedings when pursuant upon child support, like that's something I can actually totally agree with. Make it so the fact that, the woman can't be entitled to anything until it is proven and without a reasonable doubt in a court of law that is, this person's child. I can agree with that actually. And I actually would find that to be a better solution than mandating it in the hospital for all the same reasons that you had just laid out. I guess I didn't even think about applying it as somewhere else. But then the mandatory asphyxiation still occurs because I would not be okay with, some court orders in some states being held back by DNA test, where others are, you don't have to prove anything, like as long as his name's on the birth certificate. But maybe that's also the thing we have to go back to, is because, well, from my understanding, is that the father's name being put on the birth certificate is almost entirely damning in this aspect, which is that's what the courts generally use to delineate, well, you were here when the child was born, like you are going to be the person who's responsible, right? And now, especially when it comes to family court issues. Instead, maybe we remove any and all laws that point to the birth certificate and the naming of the parents in the room as null. And in fact, we resort to a much more efficient and much more accurate means by, that subjective fact, which would be DNA testing versus just by proxy of who was in the actual room while the pregnancy was occurring. Because I don't think you disagree with the problem being that there's a huge portion of men who are raising children that aren't theirs. But I think you agree that there's a bigger problem with giving the government power to then execute under law against a mandate. And I do agree with that wholeheartedly.
I'm totally for it being in those cases where it's needed, right? But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about everybody. Everybody. That's what mandatory means. That doesn't mean, we'll enact this as necessary. This means everybody has to do it. And if you do not comply with it, we will use force to punish you. Whether that's a fine or jail time, I don't care. I'm not doing it.
I agree with
and
that.
I do agree. I think there's a lot of family court stuff that needs to be addressed. But I don't think that this is the way to address it. And if we did enact it on those case-to-case basis, I do believe it should be proven before you take, half a guy's paycheck for 18 years that it's actually his kid. But again, that should be done in family court. It shouldn't be mandatory for all new families. I know you don't like that he said like that would be insulting to me and my wife. But I agree. My main argument is that I don't want the government to have power. I agree that is insulting to me and my wife, and I have no doubt that my children are mine, and I don't need the government or some asshole in a suit to come have me swabbed to prove it.
Well, listen, let me respond to that with this tweet from LED. LED actually stepped away from doing a lot of her social media outings. She went on the Whatever podcast a few times. So you're probably familiar with who she is. Actually, I'll pull up her profile picture here first. You've probably seen her. I'm pulling up my screen here too. You might not be familiar with her, Donnie, but anybody who's been like in the red pill movement, she's made, she's been she was making waves, I should say. And you can see here, she's followed by Pearl Davis and Andrew Wilson and probably a few others in the red pill movement entirely, because that's where she made most of her moves, or most of her claim to fame, I should say. And she left the social media sphere because of how toxic females are in this regard. She kind of swore it all off, saying like, I don't see any of these feminists kind of backing down. I think she'd even at one point had said like, I feel bad for men because they've lost this war. But here's what she said about this. And I think it's really poignant. And it's a bit of text. So I'll read through it and skim through it as much as I can. She says, I actually support mandatory paternity DNA testing. Here's why. I'm a female veteran who has met male veterans who were done dirty. Male service members offer the average woman a subsidized lifestyle, including free or discounted rent, insurance, and all the like. Many women will marry them based on this without forethought. I do not think these women are malicious, although it is possible, but rather I believe they are selfish and solipsistic. I can't even pronounce that. I ain't going to pretend. They don't understand what a covenant marriage means. They only know. My environment can change quickly if I marry this man, and I kind of like him. She goes on, divorce is such a common occurrence that it is considered a satirical badge of honor to go through a divorce as an enlisted man in the military. If a woman is to separate without a finalized divorce, that man is still required to pay her rent because that is the point of basic allowance for housing. It is to support the housing of the family, not the man. This will be especially true if a man becomes court ordered to do so with a finalized divorce. But here is the issue. Imagine if she's living with her boyfriend. Her ex-husband still has to pay. In some states, if a man's wife becomes pregnant by another man, the husband is still legally on the hook for that child. This is true. I live in a state where this is the law. I have seen men deploy and return to a woman divorcing them, going to a date with another man. At the same time, that husband that was cheated on must pay for her livelihood and the children he is not the biological father of. This is on top of him likely paying court processing fees. I have seen this happen on more than one occasion, so has my husband. If you really cared about male suicidality, you would encourage mandatory paternity testing. The men who go through this are the most broken men I've ever met. They're often referred to as zeroed out. Everything they ever knew and loved is taken from them. I know my marriage would not necessitate it, but for the greater good, I wouldn't mind going through the process so the average man could live a better life. We have the technology for it. It's cheap. Why not? And she says again, I know it's hard for happily married people to understand, but what if this happened to your father, brother, or son? Would you care then? And now, I just said a lot, but I'd like you to respond to that before I say anything else.
Of course. I do not know this person. I don't know their general politics, and I am a military brat. We've talked about this mostly off camera. My dad was in the military for 17 years. He was a Marine. So I feel where she's coming from. I think there are adjustments that need to be made in family courts around the country and laws when it comes to family courts. But what you are asking for is you are asking for the government to enforce this using violence on everybody, and the taxpayers will pay for it. And that I'm very much against. And these guys should be able to get DNA tests before a woman is able to benefit financially from them in any way, whether it be their insurance, their child support, their military benefits, whatever it may be. But what I won't do is I will not support it being mandatory for us and everybody having to pay for it. Some people don't have kids. Why would those people pay their tax dollars to DNA tests to make sure that your wife wasn't cheating on you? I mean, these guys, they got the short end of the stick, but what you're asking for is not the solution. And when it comes to these DNA tests, you got to stand up for yourself before I'm going to come to aid you.
Yeah.
it shouldn't be mandatory just because some people could use it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why I actually I'm going to walk back my agreements with the mandatory testing period, because I think that your solution to that by making it mandatory for family court proceedings is a much stronger viewpoint on that. We do have a couple of chats here. Abigail Shepard saying that's insane, as if our veterans aren't already getting screwed over, which is a good point. And she says to what you had said, that's a good point. Even if it's beneficial, anything that is government mandated should be looked at very suspiciously, which is true. And which is why I'm also like, I'm going to walk back, agreeing with the mandatory testing, because I think that, dude, entirely, like, you still get all of the benefits of what that paternity testing would be. You're just not forcing everyone to have to go through that process, forcing everyone's DNA into some kind of system, which I would prefer that to be. Because in the reality, if you're in the family court, your name, your soul, your bloodline is going to be dripping all over the government walls. So you have no concern about what they will know or don't know about you. Because if you find yourself in that position, I mean, good luck, dude. It's you versus the government and women. Like just pray. That's about the only option you got. And exactly what Donnie had said.
Well,
Like, well, you got to fight for yourself. But go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, me, like I'm gonna question the government at every turn. I question everything at every turn. But also giving them more general power to fix problems for a few is never the answer, especially when these things can generally be fixed in a more specific way. Like it doesn't need to be mandatory for everybody if we can build it into the courts that they need to prove that you are the father before they benefit financially from you. And I very much understand this person's tweet. I get it. It's emotional. I've seen those guys get screwed over. I feel it, but we can't we have to stop letting our emotions run political policy. The track record for the last few years of us all going by gut instinct and our initial emotion of something is not going well for us. And I think we all just need to take a big breath, stop trying to give government power to fix things, start taking away government power and trying to fix things on our own.
You know what? I have two solutions that I think would help alleviate all of this too. Eliminate no fault divorce. Eliminate child support entirely. Force people to be accountable for the decisions they have made. Prevent them from having any ability to leave outside of, abuse, right? And then don't allow them to run to any kind of state, assistance, financing, majoritively it's going to be through the welfare state and child support. But then, eliminate all of it. Literally eliminate all of it. Force people to work on their marriages, force people to work on their relationships. And here's the reality. If she does cheat on you and these things do occur, well, then there you go. I mean, at that point, it won't be considered a no-fault divorce. And then you have these things. You can move forward in that. But then don't expect that you're going to get child support. Don't expect a family court to be there. You're still going to need to be the ones who decide how and where you're going to transport the kids, who's going to take care of what. Like, no. Like just eliminate family courts entirely. Make people figure it out. And that's something I could get behind. But maybe you think differently.
If you reframed what you just said into let's get government out of marriage, I'd be for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's generally what you're saying anyway.
Right.
And I think that's a much better answer to the question that we're trying to answer than instead of let's get government out of marriage, let's get government into child rearing and birthing your children. Like,
Yeah.
I just I think if the question is we don't like government tipping the scales in marriages, it certainly isn't to add another aspect where government can tip the scales, but remove the aspect in which they're tipping the scales. I would agree that's better. I do think there's going to be people that do struggle because ultimately, there's always people on the outside that get hurt by policy. I think this is the case. It is a case where, you know, some people are going to get screwed, but I'd rather get government out of marriage than start putting them into every family in the country.
And I agree
And
with that.
you just know that the government is going to have a vault somewhere that has vials of our DNA everywhere that they use for testing and cloning and building diseases and shit, you know?
Well,
If not now, in the future. So I'm, you know, if they want to get my spit, they got to work for it.
I mean, I can just imagine that this gets used to, you know, proliferate a nice, you know, DNA genome sequencing database where they can make sure that they don't miss next time COVID 9.0 comes around, dude. you ain't gonna they ain't gonna miss this time. Ain't gonna be just a flu. I mean, that's what my mind goes to when we talk about this kind of mandatory, like building a kind of state directory of everyone's DNA. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be everyone's because you'd have to start with whenever the policy takes place. So every father and birth child from that point forward then gets thrown in here, but it would still ultimately be the same exact stuff. I and,
Well, and
and
these people that we're talking about mean well, right? Because this is always how it happens. The government says, "Hey, I see you have a problem. I can fix that for you if you just give me a little bit more power." So most of the time when people are saying, "Hey, we need more power," like with the TikTok ban, like I hate TikTok. Don't use it. I don't think it's good for you. Get off of it. But I don't want the government to have the power to force the sale of a media app in the country or do that. Let's start removing powers and stop giving them powers. Because everybody I know at this point basically is complaining about the government, whether they're right or left. But I seem to be the only one that I can find saying, let's just start stripping powers. And like I said, it's horseshoe theory, right? Like it's coming back. You've gone so far right that you're demanding the same things that the people I ran from on the left are demanding, right? I don't want the government to have power to regulate my speech just as much as I don't want them to have the power to force me to give them my DNA.
you know, it's like
I
default
don't
now.
see the difference between these arguments anymore. They're the same argument.
I think it's by
I
default
feel
though.
like I'm in the center and like I'm looking around and thinking, where the fuck did everybody go?
Rand Paul's still there with you.
Well, fucking Rand Paul lives there. He built a nice little log cabin right in the middle and he's stuck there for decades.
I know.
God bless him.
But that's why I keep saying it's like by default, right? Like it's like almost becoming a subconscious fact that because it is the uniparty, that there's really no real actual sentiment to actually strip government of power. And so what you're saying is horseshoe theory. I'm almost is like this is the direction that people have come to accept as fact, is that the government's not going to go away. The governments are not going to get smaller. The government's always going to be there. And so it's now just a battle of ball between can I get the the machine to aim at what I want it to be aimed at. And that's what it's really becoming now. You know, most of the policies being put forward are just essentially adding to the machine to the benefit of who's proposing said policy.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that. I do understand the urge to fight fire with fire. I get it. It's an old saying. I do. But if we fight fire with fire on this one, we're all gonna end up like that poor Air Force son of a bitch on fire, right? Like you, Jeff brought this up too in the conversation, the brief conversation we had on Twitter. Sorry, I keep bringing it back to that, but you know, he said, you know, government has so much power that the only way we can beat it is to give it more power and aim it, you know, in the direction we want. But government isn't a big balloon where you blow so much into it and it pops, right? If the more power you give it, the more power it has to use against you. And I cannot wrap my head around the government has too much power. We must give them more power to control
Yeah.
us in hopes that it does what we want it to do. And it never does. It never does.
And I agree with you, man. And listen, we got a few more comments in here. Shizzle says, respect. The people want this system. regardless of the script writers. And that's what I'm sitting here thinking. Yeah, he says we are the government. What happened in 17? Or no, it would have been before that.
I like Shizzle. We are the government, but we forgot. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Stop giving these bureaucrats power. You're the government. Take that power.
And
it's yours.
And I'm sitting here thinking, like, you know what happened the last time a large group of people, a nice plurality, got tired of feeling like they weren't represented over and over and over again, all the meanwhile feeling more and more and more oppressed? I tell you what, a bunch of nice nice white dudes came over and started dumping tea in a Pearl Harbor, or not Pearl Harbor, into a Boston Harbor. And that's honestly, like, because I feel that it is becoming such a subconscious fact in people's heads that, like, I mean, you got to let me pull this back. Tim Pool, he'll never be for actually pulling government back. He's sitting here putting his voice behind this TikTok bill ban. You have people like Ashley St. Clair, a pseudo-conservative. You have people like Malcolm Flex, all these kind of like mainstream conservative pundits who all are putting the same stuff forward, which is literally like just making the government bigger. None of these people actually hold true conservative values. This goes all the way back to Calendargate, which caused a huge schism in people on the right, which was showing a big disparity between conservative values and pseudo-conservative values, which was, and Ashley St. Clair said it best herself. She's like, I just want to go back to 2012. What? That's not conservative whatsoever. Going back to 2012 was just going back to a more classical liberal state with still a large government that bombs people overseas nonstop, with military bases lining up and down every sea and shining sea. It's just, that's why I'm finding myself acclimating to revolutionary ideas a lot more than I did before, because it feels every day closer and closer to hoisting the black flag, because things are not changing. It's beautiful. I know it's beautiful. It's a beautiful flag.
I've got one hanging from my garage too. It's far past time to hoist the black flag. You know, I don't know that person that you were just talking about, her tweet, but that makes sense to me. Not because 2012 was better, but because in 2012 you didn't have to have an opinion. This wasn't all shoved in your face. They still were making their lies convincing so that you could easily believe them, or at least more easily than now, because they've totally stopped trying. They've realized people will never wake up, no matter how blunt they are about things.
Fair.
So I understand why she thinks 2012 was some kind of better time, because you were about to be attacked and now you're being attacked. But those people didn't know then. They could just say, I'm not really that political. I don't really have an opinion. I don't really pay attention. You can't do that now. Those times are long gone.
Right. And I mean, I don't disagree. It was objectively better, in 2012. I mean, you got to think too, like in 2012 was like when the algorithms were beginning to take over, because the era we live in now, like pop culture is politics. Pop culture is the whatever podcast. Pop culture is the Fresh and Fit podcast. So the politics and the broken nature of anything that can be considered political has become the pop culture. It's become what's popular. And and I've probably explained this multiple times, but Tim does it, he explains it very well, which is you have police brutality content dominating most in any and all social media platforms. And that is because the metric in which the algorithm was, behest to was the fact that if it got more shares, it would deem that content as being of higher quality. And so it would show it to more people. And so again, if you can think, well, what would get the most shares? Well, something that would be shocking, something that you would make you go like, wait, something that would make you be like, bro, did you see this? And generally that all falls in the range of stuff that makes you mad, stuff that pissed you off. And so you see something and you go, dude, what the heck did I just watch? Send that to this person, and I want them to see that too. Thus, politics being naturally enraging because generally it's just the environment of what it is. Politics then took the mantle of that from police brutality, although they're not separate entirely. And now here you have it. Every single person is tuned in. Every single person has an opinion. Every single person has probably seen that viral clip that you're thinking of. And it's now made it at the forefront of everybody's mind. So now everybody is seeing color. Everybody is seeing policy. Everybody is seeing, red versus blue. And it's made this, what used to be a very simple dichotomy between those who paid attention and those who didn't, into everyone pays attention. And now the dichotomy is the very real one, and which was only ever kind of thought about or seen once every 4 years.
All right, you brought up Tim Pool, not me, but man, that guy, I blame him for the death of the center position. When people say pick a side, coward, I blame Tim for that, because I you know me, I'm a centrist. I call myself a radical centrist because I'm constantly fighting with both sides to say, hey, stop demanding the government fix your problems and giving them power to do so. He's the one that killed that position. I literally heard him the other day say, I'm a libertarian. We must give the government power to ban TikTok. Do you even understand the word libertarian? Like, that's no, not libertarian. And also the difference between staying in the center because you think it gives power to the people, and staying in the center that way you can jump to whichever side is the winning side whenever it's convenient, is ridiculous. Also, as a bald man, just fucking shave it. We all know, like, just shave it, buy a second hat. Look, oh fucking don't like that guy. Controlled opposition.
Well, listen.
He dresses like he thinks he's a teenage Johnny Cash. He's always got that stupid, like, black getup on. Like, fucking ridiculous.
But it's 'cause he's punk, dude. Did you get it?
No, he isn't. I bet he is not. I don't know. I don't know, but like he said he got, into skating. You could be a skater punk and not really be much into punk rock, but I don't like that guy. Buy a second hat and shut the fuck up.
Listen, well, this,
You know what's funny about Tim Pool? He looks like a teenager from here down, but you take off that beanie and he's got the haircut of a vice principal.
I know.
He looks like punk rock Dr. Phil.
What was insane was, I think it was just the other day I was talking about my wife, and I was like, Tim's about to be 40? She's like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, he's about to be 40. No kids, not married, but he'll sit there and scream on his chest what family values are. Like, dude. And listen, dude, I used to not care. I used to not want to dump on Tim Pool, but I'm like, the reason why we're bringing this up is because I had made this quote tweet from an America First post, because it was 10 minutes of, and I'm really not familiar who this is. And I know, and we're switching topics here for anybody who's paying attention. We're going to just change gears. So we're going to move into a bit more of the other Cuckservative takes that have led people to slowly kind of get their gears grinded down with the Daily Wire. So we'll start here. And I said, and what you'll see here, I'll go to what I said afterwards. It's a 10-minute clip. It's like 9 minutes, 59 seconds long. It's from the America First post, which I'm assuming is loosely linked with Nick Fuentes and his movement, where Liam Cosgrove, who I'm not that familiar with, I don't really know how you could be much more civil in broaching an argument over the specific subject than what he attempted to do, to only be spat back against by Tim Pool over the most nonsensical things. He was essentially showing you he'll do anything besides talk about Israel influence, which is a common moniker for someone who's paid or controlled opposition. And what I said was, it's the consistent unhinged reactions for me. I'm not going to play this video, but I can go to 248 because I had that marked here. I just like to see his face if I can, maybe not. It's just sad. You watch that for 10 minutes and you will not be able to find any ounce of respect for Tim Pool. The way the conversation goes down, the way he's treating the dude, the way he kind of taps in the other guy on the pod to actually to just reinforce what Tim had said, is just like, it's so pathetic, to put it lightly. It's this. It's again. It goes back to what you had said, which was it's this milk toast fence sitter. It's not a true centrist position. It's I'm going to just always stay on whatever side is going to get me attacked the least, while feigning that I actually have very rigid beliefs that I won't change. And it's just bullshit at this point. I mean, forgive the language, but it's just like these things constantly show themselves. And you're going to watch this. And I encourage people who haven't seen it to go watch it. You don't have to watch it off of my tweet, but just breathe in that kind of air of arrogance that comes from somebody who is unwilling to talk about this subject on any level of depth with any individual, period. And then act as if the person bringing it up is retarded for even attempting to engage in the argument. It is just downright pathetic. And I know Donnie feels the same way, but this is opening up the door for the new right or the actual right wing that doesn't truly exist on any of these platforms to really kind of start gaining ground back against these people as they continually make themselves to be fools. I picked a bad spot to let Donnie jump in there.
I thought right wing was inherently small government was the goal, right? And it's not just him. I've seen more and more people that identify as right wing, demanding more government power, bigger government for different things that they'd like to see done. I think it's wrong when they do it. I think it's wrong when we do it.
And it's just the same old, same old. It's just it's people who you think are like, oh man, dude, like, wow, look at this guy. And then a few years later, you're sitting there going, nope, I was totally wrong about this, dude. Like, how did I not see it? How could I have not seen it after watching so much this content? And I mean, let's swing it
I
back.
wish I was there to back him up too, because he was there on his own, and he was like, "Wait, off camera, you seem to agree with me," and now all of a sudden, it's Tim Pool's right, like
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, well, why don't we talk about Burma? We've sent Israel more money than any other country." He wants to say right now we're sending Ukraine more money, but overall we've sent them more money than any other country, and we consistently send them billions and billions of dollars. So to act like he's ridiculous for trying to bring that up is insane.
Oh,
Um,
exceptionally insane. Especially when it's like you're trying to leverage your point of 4 years of aid to Ukraine versus like the last 80 to Israel,
yeah.
including like all of the different things that people have pointed out, including the fact that the APAC doesn't have to register as a foreign entity. I mean, there's so many things that people could point to that are just like, it doesn't make sense. But instead of engaging with the argument in good faith, it's all bad faith. It's all you're an idiot for even bringing this up. Oh, you're just one of those guys doing everything from like the othering tactic to the demuting their opinion to denigrating their dignity at the table. Like, and it's sad because the way these things kind of evolve have now is like his fan base is now going to be like, oh yeah, dude, Liam Cosgrove. You see how he was trying to hate Jews? It's like, oh my gosh, dude. Like, I can't. It's this occult level of people who have such little self agency attaching themselves to bigger people like this, and then only ever being able to parrot the points of the person they're attached to is like, it's a disease. And I don't know how we can get rid of it because it's a new phenomena given the fact that mainstream media has broken down. And so now people used to be more affiliated with a brand and a brand's viewpoint, but a brand actually has at least a variation range. But what we see now is like people will become huge Tim Pool fans, or people will become huge, Ashley St. Clair fans. And then all that they're really ever getting politically is just one person's opinion constantly ingested over and over and over again, essentially making their fans to be miniature versions of who they are themselves.
Well, I don't know Ashley St. Clair. I'm not plugged in to the Twitter people as much as you are yet, but Tim Pool specifically got the people that would question him out of his audience, right? Like that was what Eliza Blue was, as far as how their team handled it. It was saying if you're a fan of ours, but you'll question us, get the fuck out. We don't want you to follow us. Right? That's when I was like, huh, that's a really weird strategy to go with. Personally, I would have said me and my team are too close to the story. I'm sorry, I don't want to speak on it because of that. Please go somewhere else for news about this. That's what I would have done. But he said, no, no, no. If you question me, you're a leftist with bad intentions or a bot, and you can get the fuck out. So he literally got the people in his audience that would hold him accountable to leave. And most of them did. And then you're left with yes men a lot of the times.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's like two different things, right? That's like the first part was him saying like, "Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out." Is him being like essentially putting forward like, "There's no room for disagreement with me here. I don't care who it's coming from. You can't disagree with me." And then the second part, which is if you are disagreeing, you're either a bad faith leftist or a robot. And then asserting the fact that not only is he not willing to argue with anyone who disagrees, he's asserting the fact that he is 100% right, no questions asked. It's just like, oh, what do you expect? People will leave. You're going to get anybody who had any ounce of self-agency with any slight suspicion of how this story was carried out to immediately go, bro, what? And for the time being, like he did lose quite a bit of few people. His likes were just dumped for the next few weeks on his live streams. What was the part? It was even a couple live streams later. He got visibly angry and got mad at his super chat because people were still pushing against him, being like, "Bro, we're not backing down. Like, F you. You got us all hooked onto this thing where you're this objective guy who's always willing to be open-minded, change his mind if evidence presented to the otherwise, and then all of it's just gone in an instant over what? Over a pseudo sexual trafficking advocate that no one can verify any detail about. It's like that's what you were willing to stake your career on, and it's the same guy who then, on a 20-minute clip, makes fun of Candace for saying that she'll stake her career on the Bridget Macron story. It's just like it is over and over and over again the assertion that he will never be wrong, and in fact, any opposition to him is just dumb or bad or fake. Like, and where do you go from there?
The Candace thing was funny too, because he very intentionally didn't cover any of the evidence she was trying to put forward, and they just made fun of her on the show.
It was made more funny by the fact of they pause he pauses his screen share on the photo that she specifically debunked as he's pulling it up to be like, well, it looks like she's with her husband right here. And it's like, dude, they're just showing that you haven't looked even for 10 seconds at any of the evidence or information that was coming out. And in fact, that was one of like two pieces of evidence that Candace Owens put forward. And she went into detail to demonstrate how when you zoom out of this picture, in fact, it's not a husband and wife. It's a faculty picture from where she was teaching at. And you zoom out and you can see more teachers and there's more kids there. But it's just ironic. It's like satire because Tim and his crew went to dump on this woman holding up the photo that Candace debunked hours earlier. It's like, okay, dude, like make a fool of yourself. Keep showing people that you don't care to look at evidence or facts and that you're going to hold your opinion despite that.
He's doing the same thing with the TikTok. When you're saying he didn't even take the time to look into it, I think he knows. The tweet he put out about banning TikTok the other day specifically said, I've looked into it. I'm informed. I'm for this.
Yeah.
He didn't bring up that companies that lobbied for the bill were exempt, like Facebook, or any of the information that everybody else is putting out. I would suggest go listening to Vivek talk about it, because he seems to have a pretty good grasp on the whole thing. But Tim is specifically, purposefully informed and still pushing these things. He even says, "I'm informed."
Well, what I thought was insane
I
about
don't
it.
think
Well, go ahead.
you're attributing it to incompetence. I don't think it's that. I think it's malicious.
Well, yeah, I think before I was attributing a lot of this stuff to, I guess, incompetence, more actually like incapacity. Like he doesn't have the capacity to be a genuine nice person. Um, but now I would agree with you. It's malicious. He, like if you want to listen to anybody who I kind of like go to when I want to know about a bill, like I go to somebody like Thomas Massey. And I want to listen to like what Thomas Massey, is going to say about this bill. Someone who is very well known for being very poignant about his takes on bills and specifically whether he's opposing them or for them. And one of these things that's left out entirely about this bill at all is that the TikTok bill has no sunset clause at all. Like if they put this forward, it will be there to the end of time. Why? Why don't all bills have sunset clauses? Why don't any kind of temporary measures meant to exceed, or to push out, especially if this is the argument that it's just for this one company, the sunset clause could literally be set into effect the moment the transaction is made on the divestiture. But it's nowhere in the bill. It's not found. And it's one of the first thing he brings up, talking about the fact without a sunset clause, you remove a lot of the ability for people to then adjudicate any kind of legislation against what that previous bill was, or to change in which the process is made, because without any sunsetting, it is set in stone and then forces an entirely different process to a full repeal instead of being able to actually like make smaller changes in a certain change. And it's just little things like that are just basic law, like legislation processes that it's entirely chosen not to talk about whatsoever. And he even glossed slightly over what the Thomas Massey point of view was. But go ahead.
I was just going to ask where was all this passion when it came to banning the Chinese from buying up all our farmland? Why TikTok? Right? Because they have an agenda that they can get done by pushing for banning from TikTok. There was no win to fight for our farmland, which, if you want to sell me on giving government power to do something, it's keeping our land for us. You might actually be able to sell me to give government power to do that. Maybe. I really hate that I just said that, but possibly. But to ban an app for spying on us when Facebook is definitely spying on its users as well as probably most other social media sites.
Yeah.
So I want to know where all this heat was from these Republicans when China became one of the biggest owners of farmland in the US. Where was this?
But this brings up, though,
they couldn't get what they wanted out of that. They can get what they wanted out of this, which is why they're pushing it.
So then let me ask you then, why do you think all of these people want TikTok gone? All of these people who were formerly opposing it. Now that you have the fact that the Democratic President Joe Biden has said he will sign this bill once it's coming through. Like, why do you think they want TikTok banned? Do you think it's just the simple fact of they want it banned because they want to strengthen Facebook's reign here in the States? Or do you think it has other reasonings?
Are you asking for my speculation?
Yes.
Okay, speculation. I think it's a power grab. I think it just gives them a little bit more power to monitor what we say on different websites. I think you'll notice that while they're pushing for this TikTok ban bill, there's other bills so that they can monitor gaming chat websites for gaming extremism. The push is more control. I think that part is undoubtable. Now, as far as whether they're trying to bolster Facebook specifically, I mean, probably Facebook played ball at every turn as far as the administration goes, and is still playing ball as far as all of the other websites I can think of are playing ball except for X. I think maybe it's designed specifically to bolster Facebook, but maybe it's eventually going to be used to target X. Fact is, I don't really care. If you're not going to defend our actual land and you're worried about a website, and it's not just a ban, right? It's them forcing a sale of the American branch of the company. And you're giving the government power to do that. And like you said, no sunset clause means you're giving it to them indefinitely.
I'm going to tell you what, I think it's a power grab. I do agree with everything that you said, but I think it is very specifically directed and the fact of they want to strengthen their ability to control the narrative. And I don't think any and all
The
narratives,
narrative
I think
and the
it's
counter narrative.
and the counter narrative, correct. Which is why I actually disagree with your take on TikTok. I think TikTok, if you can't use X, you're probably going to find stuff on TikTok. Albeit much harder to find, a much heavier lack of a directory. But again, there are accounts and people who have managed to not be bombed entirely off of TikTok, who are entirely against what the narrative is. Now, I don't have it here pulled on the outline, but I know I can look it up within a matter of a second, because I want people to be turned to this. Because
Well, let me be honest. I don't use TikTok, other than the time I was briefly famous on there from the clip that you posted that got removed. So I don't really know a lot about the platform, but the reason I don't use it is because I do think, I mean, ultimately a company owned by China is compromised by the CCP. The big question is this actually going to help us? And is the power that we're giving to the government going to be dangerous? I do not think this is ultimately going to help us that much, as they'll just find other ways to spy on us. And plenty of these American-owned companies are already spying on us. And I do think that this power will ultimately be dangerous. And I think it will give them more control over both the narrative and the counter narrative. And they're attacking our free speech at every turn because their policies and their ideas cannot stand up to scrutiny. They can't. So they
correct.
need to censor us and to keep control of speech.
It's actually perfect. You said that perfectly. That you said that. We will not fall for your lies any longer. Let me go ahead and pull it up on my screen right now. This is also, again, Cuckservative Central doesn't just include Michael Knowles. Ben Shapiro's on this group as well. It's a beautiful tweet here from Sovereign Brawl. And if you're not aware, Ben Shapiro got ratioed harder than I've seen literally anyone on this app ever get ratioed in my entire life. Like, I mean, this is worse than anything Jenna Ellis ever received. 47,000 likes on a tweet by Jake Shields replying to Ben Shapiro, whose tweet only had 5.6 thousand. Sovereign Bra says the age of anti-Semite accusations is over, with Ben quoting Jake Shields' initial tweet saying, Ben Shapiro stands against free speech when it helps Israel. And then Ben Shapiro says, he quotes this saying, I didn't think you could somehow magic opposition to a Chinese-owned PSYOP into an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, but I underestimated you. Truly, you have a dizzying intellect. To which Jake Shields simply says, your false claims of anti-Semitism no longer work, Ben, and the world sees through your lies. Massive absolute ratio, dude. Incredible. Something I didn't think I would ever see in my lifetime, which was Ben Shapiro, the brainchild of the conservative movement, the most easily thought of person when you think of who's that conservative guy who can say his opinions. It is Ben Shapiro, almost more forwardly put than anyone else, maybe besides outside of Tucker Carlson, depending on where you come from in this country. I say that to pair it with what came out shortly alongside the the bill to ban TikTok. So I have it here from Ian Carroll. I'm not going to play his video, but it's very simply labeled, is Israel trying to buy TikTok? He says, so Israel is trying to buy TikTok. Well, people with extremely deep ties to Israel are, and no one on TikTok is surprised at all. TikTok doesn't suppress anti-China content. It suppresses anti-Israel content. Hence, how watermelon came to signify Palestine, because saying the word would get your video deleted. And it's not pro-China sentiment that has the big boys with their political positions in banker buddies worried. It's pro-Palestinian content. Connect the dots. It's not rocket scientists. I'm going to pull this up here, though, because I did want to get to the point in which he shows a graph. Now, he goes through and shows a lot of weird connections that I'll let you go through and decide yourself what you think is actually occurring. But he has an article clip from Time Magazine, I believe, showing the disparity in tags that were banned versus ones that weren't banned. And it's pretty definite in the side of Palestine, or the Free Palestine tag.
On TikTok,
maybe it's not on
about
this
the
one.
weird-
I think he did make an earlier one. Yeah, he did. Okay, he was pairing this one together because he was proving that on his own page. I think it's got to be. Yeah, it's going to be underneath these ones. Forgive me, I know it's somewhere soon. Oh, that's unfortunate. Well, it's one of these, and so I apologize I can't bring it up. But the point stands is that it's clear if you look at the numbers based on the data that Time Magazine provides. Maybe it's this one. No. Yeah, you have to go through Ian Carroll's content to go find it. Regardless, the point being is that I don't think this has anything to do with China. I don't think this has to do with anything about any amount of preventing communist China party, influence in the States. I think it's directly what, you had said, Donnie, which was controlling the narrative and controlling the counter narrative. I think October 7th has broken open a lot of people's brains and minds to the influences that we have on us internationally, as well as the influences that the United States has on other countries as well. I don't think for much longer people can put on this pseudo pro-Zionist mask anymore and pretend that it aligns entirely with American interest. These people are, again, been somebody who was against sending aid to Ukraine, but then, has nothing to say when we're sending aid to Israel. And so we're coming to this point where I think most people are realizing, those who are in the know, at least, who are noticing, I should say, that America first is not Israel first. And I think that is entirely why you had almost all of the party lines flip on this at the drop of a hat. I mean, you go back 7 months and anybody who wanted to ban TikTok was a Republican, and it's because they wanted to ban it for Chinese influence. And anybody who was against it was a leftist because they're like, don't take away our platform. And albeit too, some of the people who are pro banning it are pro just removing that kind of, social cancer out of our society entirely. Not that TikTok itself is a social cancer, but the behaviors that have come about from these kind of apps, from the addictive social media algorithms, from the dopamine sliding every 3 seconds, another boost, another boost, another boost. So with that, in that sense, it's been a cancer to our younger generation and to many people who even aren't in the younger generation, to the way it's kind of changed their brain patterns and how to receive dopamine and of that nature. I think it's going
Let's
to
be realistic, though. Let's be realistic and let's zoom out a little bit,
Okay.
right? Biden is pushing this bill. We know for a fact now that he got paid out by China.
Yep.
We know that he didn't stop China from buying our farmland. We know he didn't stop these Chinese spy balloons that were getting information over our country. So why is everybody all of a sudden believing that he's somehow trying to save us from China? I don't get it. I don't understand how all these people that understand these three things, I'm not talking about the people that debate the three things I just mentioned. I'm talking about the people that know these three things are true and are still believing that he's helping you defend your children from China.
Well, just to think he'd help defend children at all in any sense, it's just foolish. I mean, come on, it's Mr. Sniff-a-Lot, dude. And it's great that you point that out, because that was the biggest, it's not Jake Shields' tweets. It wasn't Sovereign Brawl, putting out another extremely coherent based Christian post. It was me sitting there and exactly like what you had said, being like, what the fuck? Joe Biden wants to ban TikTok. What changed? Like, what happened? Like, all of a sudden, everybody entirely flips on this. Then you have Trump coming out and making a post or a Truth Social or Truth and saying like, no, they shouldn't ban TikTok because they just want to strengthen Facebook. I'm like, wait a minute. Like literally 2 months ago, you all were arguing for the opposite thing of what you're arguing for right now. So it wasn't. Did China stop buying farmland? No. Did China stop pushing CCP propaganda? No. Do you know what did change? People's paying attention to Israeli influence has been greatly increased. I'm trying to think, what has changed, Donnie, in the public discourse that we've all of a sudden entirely changed gears on what we want to do with TikTok.
Well, I think a big part of the people that had wanted TikTok banned and now don't is they wanted to say they wanted TikTok banned, but they didn't want to think about what it meant, right? Because like when you say you want government to do something, they'll pass a bill. It'll be called like the border bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was supposed to be to boost the border, but they snuck a little bit of funding in there for Ukraine and Gaza and all these different countries. Right? I think this is the same thing. People thought, oh, we could ban TikTok without them doing some dirty trick to sneak themselves more power. And they always pull that dirty trick, which is why I'm on the show saying stop letting them trick you. Stop. They always say we're gonna do this thing, but they always sneak themselves or their friends more money or more power, and it always fucks us the next day. Um, it's like the stimulus check. They gave you $600 that costs you thousands and thousands of dollars. Like if they tell you we're gonna do something that you want, we're gonna do it for free. You should know that you cannot afford that thing. They can say it's free. I promise you can't afford it. And
And
this is that. This is people that wanted government to do something for them, and they keep forgetting that government will fuck you every time you give them a chance to.
but I'm sitting here like, was January 6th like 100 years ago? Like, dude, like, just look at January 6th. Everyone's biggest takeaway from this is like, look at how the Patriot Act was turned against every Bible thumping Christian conservative in this country. It's just like, but that's why I'm saying like this is like so many of these people are bad faith actors, dude. Like they are literally deceptive. They are lying to you about their true intentions and are simply parroting whatever the correct opinion they must to ensure that their show or whatever platform they're working for continues to make money or they do not jeopardize their reputation. And it's like I can't even agree with the fact that people just don't understand like what government will do with these laws. Like because January 6th is such a shining moment, and especially to all of the people who would have previously supported a TikTok ban. I imagine that group of people are people who you could go, hey, you remember January 6th? And they could tell you a lot about it. So to think that they've all of a sudden like forgot what the government can do with such egregious overreaches is like, no, dude. It's just like, for one, people are just dumb. That's just reality. People are just dumb. And
These aren't dumb people, mostly, though. The people that we're talking about mostly aren't dumb. They're either people that are well meaning and trying to win a fight, same as us, or they are people whose opinions are tied to their finances and they cannot be genuine. That's what we're dealing with. We're not talking about the dumb people right now because the dumb people still call Jan 6 an insurrection. Those are the dumb people. We're not speaking to those people. We're talking about intelligent people that mean well and are trying to grasp on to a little bit of hope. And I do believe they have a little bit of irrational optimism. But when the world is as crappy as it is now, I can't blame them for that. And I certainly won't call them dumb for that. So the people we are talking about are either mostly intelligent, well meaning people, or they are the people that make money off their opinions. And so that money has corrupted their opinions. And I think, Daily Wire sometimes falls into that camp. I think Tim Pool definitely falls into that camp. But the people we're talking about, especially the people we're talking about where we're just reading their tweets, I've seen most of their tweets. These are not dumb people.
That's fair. I guess I'm just sitting here thinking of the grassroots support of people who want to ban TikTok. Because there are those people who you could talk into the street. I could run into one at Walmart right now who's going to be like, oh, dude, you on TikTok? And he's be like, no, screw that Chinese crap. That might be someone who I'm sitting here saying is sitting there going like, oh, yeah, ban that stuff. But it's still going to hold the opinion that everything that happened at January 6th was like entirely wrong and the government was attacking these people. Maybe it's because they don't understand what the Patriot Act is. And so maybe it's just because they're less familiarized with all of it overall, which I still would argue like maybe it's not dumb, but it's just like you're just being less responsible. Like you're just paying less attention. That's what we could kind of walk it back to. Well, we have to switch it over to the bloodbath hoax because I do want to cover that before we get to 9 p.m. So let's see. Let me pull this up. Because everybody who probably saw the title, you probably has either seen someone already give a statement about this, or you've not heard of this at all, or you think that Donald Trump called for a bloodbath. And you're here to be just get your mind blown open one more time, man, because it's just, again, just straight garbage. And here we have a tweet from N Wokeness, which is essentially the media narrative versus the full context. And we will play the full context, only a minute long. So from N Wokeness, they have it, and I'll put it on screen here. They say, we are witnessing the invention of the bloodbath hoax in real time. Unfortunately for them, we have X. And you can see there on the left-hand side, you can see NBC, CBS News, Rolling Stone, just saying that Trump saying there will be a bloodbath if he loses. Bloodbath if he loses. Bloodbath if he loses. Or I guess Rolling Stone says there will be a bloodbath and elections, yada, yada, yada. Here's what Trump actually said.
Mexico has taken over a period of 30 years, 34% of the automobile manufacturing business in our country. Think of it, went to Mexico. China now is building a couple of massive plants where they're going to build the cars in Mexico and they think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. Let me tell you something to China. If you're listening, President Xi, and you and I are friends, but he understands the way I deal, those big monster car manufacturing plants that you're building in Mexico right now, and you think you're going to get that, you're going to not hire Americans, and you're going to sell the cars to us. No, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. If I get elected, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole... That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories. A friend of mine,
So what you can see there is he's very specifically talking about the automobile industry. He's very specifically talking about China's importing into the United States of the automobile industry. It is not him calling for a bloodbath if he won't be elected, threatening people to not vote for him. He's very specifically talking about how the automobile industry will be, destroyed or annihilated if China's allowed to do what they're doing with no tax at the border. And what you can see is just the media running wild with it. And, and here you go. This is a clip with Nancy Pelosi lying about it too, going on CNN. This is only a 20-second one, so we can listen to this one here too.
Because he's even predicting a bloodbath. What does that mean? He's going to exact a bloodbath? There's something wrong here. How respectful I am of the American people and their goodness. But how much more do they have to see from him to understand that this isn't what our country is about? Praising Hitler, praising the Russians, because he's even... It's
just like, dude, you give these people half an inch, dude, to take it a whole country mile. Like, where did Trump praise Hitler in that speech, right? Like, it's just like, dude, it's just some of this insanity stuff that you have come from these people. But the biggest point being, like, this is definitionally saying a whole lot of nothing with a lot of words. But I'll let Donnie go ahead. What do you think about this, brother?
It's not a whole lot of nothing. That's a whole lot of lying. It's just lying. It's funny too. I've been on Twitter. I've seen some of these people today be like, "What? Show me a context in which you'd use bloodbath without meeting some kind of massacre." And people are just posting instances in when they themselves have used bloodbath in a similar context. My first thought was I've described many a concert as a bloodbath. There's people everywhere, bodies all over the place. Like
Yeah.
some of the concerts I go to are rough. Like if you don't leave with injuries, you're not doing it right. So like for them to be disingenuous and act like this isn't a saying that we're all familiar with is crazy. But also like you can see them doing the same thing. Like you can go find Nancy Pelosi using the term bloodbath in a similar manner, or all these other people tweeting like, "Oh, he's gonna kill us all." Like you yourself use that term in the same way in a past tweet. They're all getting ratioed in their tweets too, like because
Good.
like you can't say something and then be like, "Oh, that's evil," when just that person says it, but not me. Don't look at my tweets.
Well, it's hilarious because just in this 20-second clip, she makes sure to make a point and be like, she's like, and my goodness and my respect for the American people. Respect for the American people. Ma'am, if I recall correctly, on January 4th, you asked for 50 BMG turrets to be at January 6th. Like, woman, you don't respect nothing, dude. You wanted like anti-air turrets.
Can we also discuss how, let's pretend it was said in the context that they're pretending that it was said in, right? Let's just play a hypothetical thought experiment game. If I heard Donald Trump, even without him talking about the auto industry, if I heard him say, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath, I would think, yeah. It was last time you didn't get elected. Everything has been downhill since then.
We're in a bloodbath.
If we are going to talk about the real context of bloodbath, who's doing all the political violence here? Because it's not us. We don't go burn down our own cities. Nobody on the right is getting Soros bucks to go riot. It just doesn't happen. Also, we have jobs and family and shit to do. We don't riot like that. So even if he said it in the context that they're pretending he said it in, he's talking about you. It's you that does that all the time.
I'm dying over here because like has anyone been to New York in the last couple of days? Like, you want to see a bloodbath, dude? Try taking the subway in New York.
I know the stabbing / shooting that just happened on there. That's with the National Guard deployed.
No,
that was after they deployed the National Guard to the subway system.
If you want to see a bloodbath, so if try to defend yourself in New York.
If you're going to see a bloodbath, look at the news. It's happening. It's happening. The summer of love. What would you call that if not a literal bloodbath? People died. People lost their businesses. Communities were destroyed. It's never us that does that. It's always them.
And and by them you mean the
leftists.
Yes.
The people saying, "Oh, he said there's going to be a bloodbath." Like maybe he said that. He was definitely referring to the auto industry, but I'd like to talk more about the literal bloodbaths done on the account of the political left. Let's talk about that. Those are actual literal bloodbaths with people dying.
And it was like what, $60 billion or not, or was it 60 or $6 billion of damages that were claimed to insurance companies this is just the damages reported throughout the claims being paid out for all of the businesses that had insurance. So that doesn't even include anything and all that wasn't insured or did not receive a claim. And that happened in a period of like 4 or 5 months. It's just enough nonstop rioting, looting. And here's the thing too, like we don't even talk about the summer of love. Like let's talk about all of the ridiculous underreporting happening with all of the crimes happening on the border. Let's talk about the fact that Houston police, just on our last episode, just openly said that they're not handling 264,000 cases suspended indefinitely because they just don't have the people to staff it, to handle it. Let's go to the fact that Pittsburgh literally announced their first purge from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. every single day starting, I mean, I would imagine
police getting jumped in New York.
Yeah, police getting jumped in New York.
That to your list.
You have, I mean, and then the other viral video that came out of New York here recently, which was essentially a guy getting mugged, or a guy defending himself, and you just watch as like an entire subway of people just have to lay on the ground because gunshots start ringing out. And what do? Good luck. Go defend yourself. Right to jail. Try to leave. Try to run away. You're probably going to be the first person who gets gunned down. Like, what do you? And then again, like, he's just like, for one, if you live in New York, like, I'm praying for you, but like, I don't understand why you'd want to live there. The bloodbath is happening everywhere.
Well, we talked about it with the Pittsburgh Purge on the last show. These cities are rat traps. You are in a trap and they are killing you, and you need to forget the fact that there's cheese there and get the fuck out. But like we talked about on the Pittsburgh Purge show, you are trapped. They used inflation to take all of your money and eat through your savings. So you probably can't move now. You are not allowed to have a gun to protect yourself. And they are letting criminals beat up the cops. So if a cop can get beat up and the criminals are set free, you have no chance. No chance. And then they're also punishing the people that will stand up for you, like Daniel Penny. It is a trap. They're in a trap. And at this point, I think very few of them that aren't already wealthy people can get out.
And I do agree with that. I think that's honestly like the saddest part, is like knowing that like these people have been just destroyed 6 ways from Sunday. Your finances are destroyed. You know, actual wages haven't risen in over 30 years. Inflation is just constantly being lied about. It's well beyond any number that's ever being presented at any figure. Everyone knows it. Everyone feels it. And you just get on, you go to work, you live this miserable day. You fight past 30 people, you know, that weren't speaking English. Just, you know, get home and make sure you can get to the right subway. And then you sit down and you pull up social media and you go, and then an Ed Krasenstein tweet pulls up, and the tweet reads, I don't know why anybody is complaining about the economy. The economy is doing great under Joe Biden. And it's like, man, dude, I mean, listen, honestly, you could take away the context of the automobile industry. At this rate, there will be a bloodbath in this country if Donald Trump is not elected. If we're currently in a bloodbath, and the trajectory to get us here was electing Joe Biden, well, you can guarantee and follow the logic there and extrapolate that to, well, I think if you add 4 more years to a 4-year-long bloodbath, you're probably going to have a much bloodier bath. I think it's as simple as that. And they can sit there and scream about it all they want. People know, everyone who knows that, like, you know, it's not going to be MAGA who's going to go running out to homes and burning people's businesses down and throwing bricks through windows. These are the people who are going to go to the government buildings, like what Antifa should be doing, but they don't. These people are going to be the ones that are going to surround Nancy Pelosi and be like, listen, dude, we begged. We begged. Like, I'm sorry, like 10 million is too much. Like, we can't take it anymore. And it's going to be, it's scary. And I know, and I sit here and laugh as much as I can about it, but it's real, dude. Like, when people are backed into a corner like this, and you do remove what seemingly is that last strand of hope, which is Donald Trump, and you put people up against the wall, staring on the barrel of 4 more years of Joe Biden, 4 more years of inflation keep raising, 4 more years of the border not being solved, like it's going to be too much for too many people. They will refuse it. It won't matter what the election happened, anything. I think any result outside of a Donald Trump election is going to result in a lot of terrible things for a lot of people in this country. And that's just a fact.
That's a fact that we both agree on.
Hey, at least we agree.
So, I mean, wholeheartedly, I agree on that. No disagreements there.
And that's why, you know, and I say this too, and I'm sorry I don't have the tweet pulled up. I had seen a tweet which I sent my wife not too long ago. The average income needed in 2020 or no, it's either 2016 or 2020. So forgive me that I can't remember the first date. You needed around $59,600 as a median, as an income, to be able to purchase your first home within a period of, I think it was like 3 or 4 years of having this said salary. That number in 4 years has now raised to $109,000, is now what the median income is needed for 4 straight years to be able to purchase a starter home around, anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000. If you look at the numbers, by definition, that is limiting starter homes only to essentially the top around like 15% of people, for 20 to 15% of people. It is no longer, a pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of thing. It is more so like you just don't live long enough to, the human lifespan is not long enough to be able to pull your bootstraps out of such a deep hole that the United States government has put people into. And so I think there's going to be a lot more complexity when it comes to the issues of Social Security. There's going to be a lot more complexity when it comes to issues such as what's going to be required to receive a first-time buyer home loan, what's going to take to receive kind of some of these grants. Like, I think the housing market, real estate, is going to need an entire overhaul. I mean, we're victim of inflation. We're victim of a lot of, what do you call those? Price gougers. But essentially, it's people who just flip homes. They buy a $100,000 home in an area that it's sitting in. It fits contextually there. The homes around it are also $120K, $130K. But they put a bunch of money into it. They flip it. And now this home is now $380,000. And nobody living in that area can attain that money to purchase it. And now you take that too. Nobody's going to be willing to purchase a high-end home in an area that doesn't have a wealth that sits at that level. And so there's so many things that go into this that's like, we can tie it all back to that popular video that's going around, which is, the psychologist is saying like, this is suicidal ideation of men. He's viewing as not an actual mental illness pattern. He's viewing it as men logically making the decision that like, actually, this is worthless for me. And I would rather choose to end my life than suffer for 45 more years without achieving or attaining what I believe I would ever get in my lifetime that would make me feel fulfilled or happy. But again, they say this all the time. When civil war comes, when revolution comes, it's never, announced. It's not going to just be like every person and citizen is handed a flyer and they're like, okay, we'll get ready because, by day 28, the power is going to go out. And I think by like the second of the next month, like the water is going to be running dry. Like, it's not going to happen like that. The lights are just going to go out. The power's just going to go out. There's just going to be some kind of, insane legislation that instantly gets passed. Martial law is going to happen. No one's going to know what's going on. It's going to just be chaos. And that's how these things happen. We're watching. It's literally every fabric in society, on every foundation, on every avenue, in any category, whether it's Hollywood, fitness, you can see it. You can see the fraying of all the fibers that hold it up and what it is. And it's just going to be all at once, just like a nuke, like an implosion. And it's sad to say, but it's the reality we're looking at. And I guess, well, with that being said, I think we just hit the 9 o'clock mark. Donnie, is there anything you want to say before we end out? Go ahead and close this off.
Oh yeah, definitely follow Atlas. I really appreciate your audience of probably mostly Christian people for dealing with my profanity and weird pirate flags and stuff. I said it's okay to reach out on the last show and somebody asked me for money, so I'm back to don't follow, don't subscribe, just don't bother me.
It's true, I can back him up. He sent me the screenshot. I don't know which one of you saw my video and wanted to go ask Donnie for money. Please don't do that again. But with that being said,
I don't
guys,
think it was one of yours.
No, it wasn't. It was just some random Cash App. But with that being said, guys, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I apologize for the technical difficulties. For those who aren't aware, I should have probably said this at the beginning too. Wayne will be coming on with me here in about 30 to 40 minutes. I'm going to be doing an episode with him as well. We're probably only going to make that last an hour or so, just because like I can only handle so much stress in one day. And I do need to like sleep at some point. Just because I got to make sure I figure out what I'm doing for tomorrow, since this new job is probably off the table, and figure out what I got to do to call in and quit and all that stuff, and start searching for another avenue. And so with that being said, I appreciate all the support, guys. Yeah, like Donnie said, follow me on YouTube, follow me on X, follow us on Spotify as well. Make sure you rate, like the show, do all the fancy things that proliferate the content, and share it if you enjoy it. And if you hate it, share it too. Just make sure you put your opinion there so I can disagree with it. And thank you for coming on, Donnie. I appreciate it. God bless everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Take care.